It's the Jeremy Hazelwood Show. What's good, what's good? Let's get ready to go.
Welcome to the Jeremy Hazelwood Show. Plug in, turn it up.
Let's go.
Hey, hey, welcome to the Jeremy Hazelwood Show. Push play, let it roll.
Let's go.
What's good? Welcome to my show. In 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
Hello and welcome to the Jeremy Hazelwood Show. This podcast is all about exploring a wide range of topics that spark curiosity, build community, inspire action, and deepen our understanding of the world around us. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe now on whatever platform you're seeing or hearing this by tapping that follow or subscribe button. Music has the power to inspire, heal, unite, and transform culture. In Season 4, we're diving into the world of music and the people bold enough to chase creative dreams. Whether they're on stage, behind the scenes, or in the boardroom, these guests are building culture, creating impact, and showing us what it means to turn passion into purpose. Today's guest is a music industry exec with decades of experience working in marketing, promotions, and artist development, from Master P and No Limit to artists like GloRilla, Juice WRLD, Ella Mai, Kendrick Lamar, and many, many other artists in between, which we might get into in this conversation. He sits on the board of the directors at the High Museum of Art in Atlanta, was the executive VP of urban promotions at Interscope, and runs Maven Marketing, which we will definitely get into in this conversation. Welcome to the show, Keinon Johnson.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining today. Let's just jump right in. We know where you are now, but I'm always curious, how did you break into this industry? So let's take it back to before you were in the music to what it is now. What attracted you to it? Let's go from there.
Well, my journey in the music business started way back when I was in college at Clark Atlanta University. It was during the early days of 90s hip hop. So I was actually going to school with a buddy of mine named Jay Irvin, who currently he's a big wig in the music industry as well these days. He was running the street promotions account for a company called WRLD Records. And at that time, WRLD had groups like Wu-Tang Clan, Mobb Deep, Alcoholics, Big Pun, to name a few. And I ended up working with him on his street promotions team. Came on as an unpaid street promotion person for the first year or two. I saw it as an opportunity to break into the business and build my name up in the streets. And eventually, about a year or two of doing unpaid work, I actually ended up becoming the street promotions rep for WRLD Records in Atlanta, which eventually led me to opening up my first company, which was called Team FCC, which was a street promotion and guerrilla marketing company out of Atlanta. And we ended up taking on pretty much all of the street promotions accounts for all the record labels in the city at the time. So between the years of, I want to say 1989, we pretty much ran the streets of Atlanta as far as street promotions. So that was like my entry point.
Interesting. So with the street promotions, when you got on, like that had to be really exciting. So you're in college and probably a fan of all these artists, and you actually get to work on these projects and promote them. Like that's pretty dope. So when you were doing the promotions, the street team back in college, I guess you were at Clark. So was it only in Atlanta or was it regional? How did that work?
It was primarily here in Atlanta. On occasion, we would have to go up, to neighboring markets and do promotions for tours that would be outside of Atlanta. But for the most part, it was pretty much handling all of the street promotions accounts for the city of Atlanta, Georgia. So, we ended up getting accounts for Epic Records, Arista Records, Priority Records, RC, which was a spinoff division of WRLD Records. Man, it was a great introduction to the music business.
Yeah. And one thing that you've said already off the top is just how they contracted with your company. I think when a lot of people think of street team promotions and record labels, they just assume that the record label has just a bunch of people on staff or interns that will go to whatever city and do the street teams. But sounds like what they're doing is contracting that work out to local street teams that know the market, that know where to put the posters and everything like that. So that's an opportunity for people who might be looking to get into the biz that do not work for a record label.
And absolutely. It was kind of like the minor leagues of the music business. That's definitely what was the entry point for people like myself and some other people that came up in the business around that time. As opposed to looking at it as a means to make money, I had other jobs during that time as well. I was actually working at the airport to make money and put gas in my car at that time. For me, I saw it as an opportunity to build my name up and actually, form bonds and relationships within the music business that would allow me to gain some knowledge about the business,
Yeah.
and eventually become somebody that actually had a real job in the music business.
Yeah. And it's like you were working for free, but you really weren't, because you were getting paid in knowledge and relationships and an
For
inside
sure.
view. And it's something that you can't put a price on that. And it's like if you didn't work for free, you most likely would not have had the career that you have now. And I just wonder how many young people today are like, no, if they're not paying me, I'm not going to do it, you know?
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people take that approach these days, brother.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a different kind of hustle going on now. I don't even know that street promotions is primarily being used in the music business anymore, because I think it's one of the best ways still to get directly in front of your audience, you know?
Yeah, especially in the markets, as opposed to just, excuse me, running like digital campaigns or something like that, which is also a great way, but actually having a presence in the city with a physical presence definitely makes a difference.
Sure.
Yeah, so walk me through your career then. So you had your own promotions company for a while, and where did you take it from there?
Yeah, so started running my own company, Team FCC, which was founded in 1997. From there, I graduated from Clark and Knighton, and I ended up getting my first official job in music business, which was at Priority Records. And that's where I ended up working with groups like Master P, Ice Cube, T Money. And, during that time, Master P was running the South. Like he was the big deal in the music business at the time. He pretty much changed the landscape of hip hop at that time, with the deal that he had with Priority, having a distribution model, where he retained 85% of funds made from all of the music that he put out. And Priority ended up getting 15% of what was being made. It was a revolutionary deal that led to people like Baby and Cash Money replicating some of that same thought process with the deals that they ended up having. And yeah, man, working with P and them at that time was a great entry point for me to build my name up, because I was able to open up a lot of doors because it was so hot at the time. You know, from Priority, I ended up going to MCA Records after that, where I worked with groups like Avant, Mary J. Blige, Common, Talib Kweli, to name a few. And then eventually ended up going to Interscope Records. I spent the bulk of my career going from a regional rep to a national director to a VP to SVP to eventually land as the EVP of Interscope Records.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about that here shortly. These roles that you had, were they all in the realm of promotions, or did they vary a little bit at each of the labels that you worked for?
Well, they were all promotions, but just different levels of it. Initially as regional reps, and then as national directors, and going into management, where I had to venture out to LA and move to LA to take on these positions, and the heads of the department. Okay. So yeah, that's when I became SVP, and was when I ended up moving out to LA and I was bi-coastal at that time, running the department.
Yeah, and we use the word promotions lightly, high level. For the listener, is a promotions job at a record label. What does that entail?
Primarily in the promotions department, your position is to get as much audience in front of the artists that you're putting out. So with that, primarily what we were focused on was getting music played on the radio stations around the country. So I dealt with the program directors, music directors, DJs, and the people who were responsible for building up artists' play around the country on a daily basis. I would manage my team. We would just be responsible for making sure that the music got played as much as possible. So, anytime people would say, I hate hearing this song on the radio, I was the person that was getting that song played 1 million times a day. And unfortunately, getting you to either love it or hate it. But our job was to force it down your throat so that you would eventually consume it and purchase it as a product.
Everybody has a job, right? Everybody has a job. So one thing, and I've never done this personally, but back in college, I took a radio promotions class, and I'm just curious. I'll tell you what the description was for me, and tell me if this has been your experience or if it has modified through the years. But if you're working for a label, if someone's over promotions, you have people in certain markets, and they're meeting with the record labels, with the radio stations once a week. There's like a day where the different promotions people can play music for the music director, and you basically have to sell them every week on why this song should be put on the radio. And it's a battle. And it's like, from what I was told, there's no next week in promotions, was the phrase that has stuck with me even 20 years later. It's like, if this song does not get placed this week, forget about it. It's not getting placed. How would you describe like that environment? Is that still or accurate?
Yeah, I mean, certain stations you would talk to once a week, Other stations you may talk to every other week. You know, in my role, I would talk to stations multiple times a week. You know, it's a business where it's super relationship driven.
Yeah.
So most stations may have a certain time or day where they take calls to hear your works. A good record rep doesn't really focus on that. A good record rep is dealing with the people that at these stations on a regular basis, even outside of those call days.
Yeah.
So we would do lunches on a regular basis, dinners on a regular basis, or just kicking it where we wouldn't talk about music at all, just extending the relationship outside of the office. The best kind of record rep is a record rep that doesn't necessarily have to sell you all the time, but based on the relationship, you get to get your music exposed at the highest level.
Yeah, that's interesting because it does sound like it is very relationship driven, less transactional. And I want to talk about your tenure in a little bit, but just the longer that you do it, the better your relationships will be, you know, assuming you have a good personality and great relationships and are good at nurturing those relationships. But I imagine those people certainly have a leg up over new people just entering into the business that are trying to get their music played with a radio station.
For sure. The longer relationship you have and the more trust that you have within that relationship, the easier it is to get your music played. You know, I was able to build really great relationships early in my career that ended up leading me to having relationships with people that I started out in the business with, you know, on the same level. You know, some people were DJs when I first came into the business that are now executives themselves. And to this day, we still have to nurture those relationships and help each other out, you know, the different things that we have coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, and it's got to be cool to see that growth, like you starting so young, I mean, in college, and DJs and other people, especially in the Atlanta market, and just seeing everybody continue to elevate and reach levels of success that when you were younger, you're like, hey, one day we're going to do this, and now y'all have done it. Like, that's got to be very satisfying.
Super rewarding. Definitely very rewarding, man. It's been a good run, man. God has blessed me, and, you know, he's still blessing me to this day.
That's great. So when you were in college, before you did street team promotions, did you ever have aspirations to be an artist or DJ?
I think all of us, you know, at some point had aspirations to be, you know, an artist at some point. I definitely had spit a couple of rhymes here and there.
Okay.
But I quickly realized that wasn't the position that God was putting me in.
Yeah.
I was never the greatest rapper. And I definitely can't hold an amazing tune, but I was always good at creating relationships and always good at having great interactions with people. And I knew early on in my career that was one of my strong suits is I'm really good at building and creating relationships with people. So, you know, early knowing that was my strong suit, I definitely wanted to make sure that was what I chased when the opportunity presented itself for me to become someone within the business.
Yeah. I know you weren't necessarily, well, based on what it sounds like, you haven't been involved necessarily in the part of the record deal process. It's been heavily involved in promotions. And let's, you know, fast forward through your work with Interscope, but you know plenty about the industry. And I'm just curious for people listening, how do you get a record deal nowadays? It's still knowing people. You didn't have the streams, you didn't have the numbers, you had to have some kind of following, or even better, you sold some units independently. How are deals happening these days?
A lot of it is happening because artists are building their careers themselves and putting in the actual footwork and the groundwork ahead of time before they even go into labels these days, which is pretty much the way that a lot of artists are pursuing label deals. The best way to go in, what I tell everybody, is going in with leverage. So a lot of artists are building their story up, DSPs, which are like Apple, Spotify, and they're getting their music exposed to their audience ahead of even pursuing a label deal, so that by the time it's time to go in, labels are actually pursuing them as opposed to artists trying to go into a label early on. So I think that's the best way for artists to pursue a label deal these days, so they can actually have leverage when they're going into a situation with a label, you know?
Yeah, 'cause I would imagine the more data that you have, and this even ties back to promotions and radio promotions, the more data that you have for your artists, the better you can sell that story, the less of a risk it is for the label to take you on and to sign you and put you out, because you've already established. They know you got something here as opposed to just starting from scratch.
Yeah, labels, I mean, I hate to say it, unfortunately, but I you know, labels a lot of times these days are not actually building these artists out. They're amplifying what's already happening with an artist, you know? So I think a lot of artists, it would be to their benefit to actually know who their audience is and actually be tapped into their audience before even pursuing a deal with a label, because labels, what they do is they add gas to the fire that's already happening, you know? So you want to definitely come in knowing and having an idea of who your audience is and having an idea of how to reach that audience before you even come into a building.
Yeah, yeah. Given the work that you do, how many times a day, a week are people asking you to listen to their music? Here's my SoundCloud. Is it every day?
That's pretty much at least a once a day thing for sure. And I don't mind it. You know, at the end of the day, you never know who is going to be the artist that's going to be the next artist to blow. So, you know, with me having an advantage of having connections into the music business and being able to feed music directly into a system, I never want to be too busy or too big on myself to not, you know, pursue and listen to whatever the next thing may be. So I don't mind it at all.
You know, and I wonder, like, how much is really good music versus just good story or good numbers? So if you had two artists say, hey, Keinon, check out this song, and one, you're like, man, this is dope. I love this. I love the beat, love the lyrics, but they're just starting. They have like 300 streams versus another group where you're like, it's not that good, but they've got 100,000 streams. What do you do in that scenario? Are you pushing like, okay, they already have an audience, but I like this one better? Like to me, that's kind of not ethical, but you know, that's the jam in the music industry.
I think you got to ask yourself, for me, I'm going to ask myself, what's good? Because what's good to me, you know, it may not be what's good to an actual audience out there. Like, keep in mind, at the end of the day, I'm here to promote to an audience that may not be me, you know? So if an artist is actually coming in with 100,000 listeners, monthly listeners on Spotify, obviously there's something going on there. And obviously there's an audience out there that's gravitating to this artist. So it's up to me then to actually try to make that grow. Yeah. So I would prefer to deal with an artist that has an audience coming in the door than one that's just trying to build from the ground up, because you actually have an idea data-wise of who you're pursuing as far as an audience, you know?
Yeah, it sounds like if, let's say, you like the other artist better, maybe they're just not ready yet. This sounds great, but let's see if it has legs. Like, go work this record yourself, go promote it, and hit me back up. I like your music, but it's just not, you're not in that place yet where I'm ready to show people. It's not because the music sucks. It's just, I need more of a story to be able to make this a better situation.
You have to build the story. Storytelling is a big part of the music business and artist development in general these days. I think for a great deal of artists that are coming up now, the audience is buying into the actual artist as opposed to songs. You know, so social media comes into play, and people are buying into who the artist is and what they're doing on a daily basis, as opposed to just what one song is, which is different from the past where it was all about the song. You know, when I first came into the business, it was all about blowing up one or two singles, going into an album cycle, as opposed to now, where it's all the other intangible things that help to build beyond our reputation, you know, with their audience. So at the end of the day, that groundwork put in definitely is a beneficial tool coming into any situation as far as an artist, whether it's signing with a label or remaining independent.
Yeah. What degree is artist development even happening with labels these days?
Some would say it's not happening at all.
That's what I've heard, but I'm like, I don't know. Let me ask Keinon, because he would know better than I would.
You know, it's so fortunate, bro. I don't think there's a lot of artist development happening. I think a lot of labels are, to an extent, just bringing a lot of different artists in with volume, with the assumption that something is going to break out of this volume of artists that we have on the label. And unfortunately, the life cycle of artists with a label system is a lot shorter than what it used to be as well, you know, whereas in the past, there would be an incubation period where there would be artist development, and before you even came out, they would be building you up and moving you around and actually doing promo tours where you would go around the country meeting different partners before a record was even dropped. That doesn't really happen much anymore, unfortunately. And I think those things were beneficial because if you think about it, when we were doing those promo tours in the past, you had an opportunity for artists to go into markets and break bread with PDs and MDs. And by the time a record would come out, that program director would have a vested interest in seeing that artist succeed.
True.
Because they actually were building some kind of relationship ahead of the process of, wanting a record to be played. And that's just not happening now. Now we're just coming in cold with music. And oftentimes there's two different audiences that are being catered to. Like there's a streaming audience, but the streaming audience may be different from radio audience. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you're trying to make those two come together. But if the artists have not done any groundwork to, build relationship on the radio end of things or partner development, how do you differentiate between all the other acts that's out there?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a really good question. And then also great insight. So for artists listening to this particular episode, I think it's a good question that they should ask themselves, like how you're differentiating yourself. If everybody's doing the same kind of content, promoting the same way, it just becomes a sea of sameness. So how are we standing out from that?
A sea of sameness. I love that.
Let's talk about over your career. What's the part that you love the most about the work that you've done?
Man, it goes back to what it was from the beginning, loving working with artists that I was actually into. When I was working with Mobb Deep and Wu-Tang as a street team rep, I was in love with those acts.
Yeah.
To the point that we were making earlier, it wasn't a big deal that I didn't necessarily make financial money, off the rip, because it was so rewarding for me to be able to help break the artists that I loved. And that has been key for me throughout my career, like being able to work with artists like Kendrick Lamar from the beginning and watch him go from underground champion to Pulitzer Prize winning, world renowned, one of the biggest artists in the world, and never sacrificing his artistry or authenticity during that process. And we being able to communicate that vision as part of his promotion and marketing staff, that's super rewarding. And, those stories are definitely been the most rewarding parts of my journey, working with artists that I love and believed in and watching them become from these small entities to some of the major artists in the world. That's a blessing.
I was going to talk about Kendrick further down, but since we're latching onto it here, it seems like a good point in the conversation to talk about it. So you've basically worked from Good Kid, Mad City up through, was it Mr. Morale was the last Kendrick record?
Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Yeah.
Okay. Good Kid, Mad City. Underground people knew of Kendrick, but you were there to push that first album on Interscope. When you first heard Kendrick and you're like, oh, I get to be a part of this project, and this guy's actually good. This is not like an artist I have to push because he's on the label. Like, he's incredible.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
Well, I won't say it was easy because Kendrick was considered an underground artist when he first came out. Like, this was the blog era where music was being promoted through the blogs back then. And there was a clear separation between what a blog rapper was and what a mainstream rapper was at the time. So for us, we had to make that transition from him being an underground act from the Section 80 product to Good Kid, Mad City. And that transition wasn't the easiest, but you got to remember, like, we had songs like Swimming Pools, which came out, but before that, you had The Recipe, and The Recipe was not a number one record.
Right.
Great record,
Yeah.
but it wasn't a number one record. So between Section 80, going to The Recipe, through Good Kid, Mad City music, that was a process. So going back to what I mentioned earlier, we put in the groundwork with Kendrick. Kendrick was out here on the road doing promo tours, meeting with radio stations, and actually building relationships with radio before we ever asked any records to be played. So he put in the work early on, and the music ended up translating with the audience and translating with radio. And we ended up, at the end of the day, getting 3 number one records off of Kendrick off that first project, which laid the foundation for where we are today with him.
And that album really was a breakout album, especially from the sound that was happening in that time. And even then, since that until now, there's really not an artist that sounds like Kendrick. Even from a production standpoint, he takes a lot of risks in his production that just wouldn't work or be given the time of day by radio or whatever. So I know it had to be hard work taking a sound that's not a traditional radio sound, but it was just enough. You had the budget of Interscope behind it, which helped, and the hustle behind it.
Sure.
But knowing you also had Dr. Dre's name behind it, so you had a lot of things that checked the boxes, which probably made it a little bit easier to get on, but it still is not necessarily the most radio friendly kind of sound compared to what was happening at the time. but he broke through. What did you all learn from that first album rolled out that helped with the future releases of his projects?
Man, just that it was a changing time in the business. So, between music being exposed online, like I said, via the blogs, and having to fuse the different audiences between the street audience or club audience with the radio audience, with the online audience, that was the new format for breaking an artist. You had to actually success at each tier in order to break artists at that point. You know, we were able to make that work between building a digital audience, which ended up becoming a social media audience, and linking that with radio. We were able to make all three come together and build a cohesive approach to breaking him as an artist. It just stuck. But I mean, Kendrick is just a special act in general, dog. Like he's a once in a generation act. Yeah. And he was deserving of all the success that came along at the time.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite Kendrick album?
My favorite album is probably Damn.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think Damn was definitely the most critically successful.
Yeah.
But I think it was perfect from top to bottom. And it checked all the boxes between being critically successful as well as just successful as far as sales as well. Just being able to take that record around the world and have him become the mega artist that he became during that album, that definitely was very rewarding. So that would probably be my favorite one.
And I know you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you my favorite Kendrick album, and that is Mr. Morale. And I just thought, because it was so personal, there were several songs on that album that I listened to, and you listen to the lyrics, the tone, like I had tears in my eyes. Like, it was so many songs that just touched on topics and the way that he would go deep in them in a way that no artist had ever done before. And Kendrick's always pretty introspective, but I felt like it was very personal. It was relational. Yeah, it was just, I felt like I was sitting in a counseling session, but also just watching art being made by Kendrick. And I like all his albums, but that one to me is my favorite one. And so many mantras, even like the Mirror song, like I choose me, I'm sorry. There's certain things that you can take and inspire and motivate in a way that his other albums didn't to me. But I love his whole catalog, but that one just really stood out to me in a different way.
Definitely very introspective, definitely very personal, for sure.
Yeah. And what I liked about his albums, in comparison almost to Outkast in a way, in that each album has its own sound. There's nothing on one album that sounds like the previous album, and that's very similar to how an Outkast album would be, which I really enjoyed.
It's interesting. I feel like his cadence is he does one album for the audience and one album for himself. And what I mean by that is each album that they've been either very, 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 left of center. Yep. And the next one has been very much kind of straight down the road, and for his taste, straight down the road, critically acclaimed. He just kind of goes back and forth in that cadence with his album.
I didn't even think about that until you said it, but when I think through the discography, that's exactly what it's been. And so that means his next album is going to be something that's more his album, because
for sure
GNX was more for the people.
Definitely more so for the people, for sure.
So we talked about worst part of your, or best part of your job. What's just the worst part of the work that you've had to do?
Well, I can't say worst part, but the hardest part of the job is definitely working music that you don't really love. There's nothing investing your time and energy into something that you really don't believe in. But unfortunately, it's part of being great at your job. And you kind of got to grow that layer of skin in being in the business, because everything that you get is not going to be great. In fact, the majority of the music that I probably had to promote during my career has probably been music that I didn't love, but it was up to me to use my relationships to get that music exposed. And I've gotten some stinkers exposed during my career. I won't name any, because I've taken some records number one. I've taken some records number one that, I definitely was not the greatest fan of. But at the end of the day, the job is the job.
Yeah, and that is not what my podcast is about. This is not shock podcast. Otherwise, I'd be like, tell me who those artists are, Keinon. Expose them. Who are they? But no, I keep the peace. We speak high level, but we understand. I get you, man. I get you.
You feel me?
Yeah. So what are some misconceptions that people would have about the music industry?
Misconceptions about the music industry.
Or is it really everything that we think it is?
Well, I get this question a lot. Is there a number one button, or is it easy just to take records number one? Like basically, asserting that you can just pay to get records
yeah.
number one. And I always tell people, if that was the case, every record out there would go number one. There has to be an audience that is into a record in order for a record to be played in mass across the country, whether it's on the radio, whether it's on DSPs, wherever it is. These partners of ours are not going to put their jobs on the line to just expose a whole bunch of garbage,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, there is no just magic button that puts records in position to go number one. It's a lot of hard work behind the scenes, a lot of wrangling, and a lot of using of our relationships in order to leverage those relationships to get these records exposed.
Yeah.
You know, it's not as easy as it may seem.
Right.
It's super relationship driven.
Yeah. Still, the politics of the industry are always at play. Now, your last stop at Interscope, describe, just so people know, like, what is a day or a week in the life like of Keinon Johnson as executive VP of promotions? Was that your title?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Executive vice president. Yep.
Yeah. So a day or week in the life, what are you doing day to day?
Man, traditionally it's you get up. At first, I have a conference call with my staff. I would do one-on-ones with my staff to go over the priorities of the day, to outline stations and where the problem areas may be for our records that we need to address going into the first part of the day. And then from there, reaching out to radio stations to try to get those stations to either play a new record or play an existing record that we're working more than they currently are playing. The mid part of my day would be mainly consumed with Zooms. Typically, I would do somewhere between 5 and 8 Zooms on a day.
Oh my God.
And that may be artist,
much.
management calls, that may be product manager calls, or it may be senior level, department level management calls that I would have to do throughout the day. And my day typically starts around 8 a.m. and it will probably end somewhere between 8 and 9 p.m. because Interscope, of course, was based on the West Coast. So my day would be, a East Coast and West Coast day on most days. And on a special night, that day may not end with the conference calls. It may mean going and checking out talent at a show in the evenings and taking our partners out to see a new act or act that's already popping out to a show, and just catering to those partners and making sure that they get to see artists outside of the regular promotional schedule. Okay.
Like lots of meetings.
Definitely lots of meetings, definitely a lot of overlap of, jumping off and on calls throughout the day. But you know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's the grind of the music business, but I love it. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and it's a people business. So on a radio promotion side, you're responsible for getting a song placed, making sure that it's moving up the charts in rotation. When do you know a song is a total dud and it's time to change the plan?
Research from radio stations, research is basically how radio stations gauge if a record is working a lot. They send out what is called call-out research, and they usually allow for 3 different batches of research to come back to see if a record is actually resonating with the audience.
Okay.
That usually lasts up to about 8 weeks. A typical lifespan for a record is usually 8 weeks if the station's really allowing it time to build with their audience. And if the research is saying this record is shit, that's when you pretty much pull away from it and you move on to something else, because the station is not going to play a record that the audience is clearly telling them is not working. So that's usually the indicator of if a record is working in that call out research.
And for some artists, that might be the last shot they have, right? Whereas like, hey, it didn't do much, but other artists just like, well, we got another single that we're ready to work. Does that happen where it's like, this did so bad, we had another single, but we're going to go back and rethink this?
For taking a record to radio is based on how much a record is actually performing. And what I mean by performing is, streaming and actually bringing in revenue. Typically, if an artist is early on in their journey as an artist at a label, labels these days are not going to be prone to go to radio immediately. They're going to want to build that artist up and actually have some kind of indicator that there's something worthy of actually taking a record to radio, because it's an expensive proposition. So you want to kind of hedge that something here and a reason why we should actually be taking this record to radio, because big companies, for all intents and purposes, are amplifying something that's already happening with an artist. You know, and taking a record to radio is the ultimate amplifier when it's all said and done.
True.
So after we've done the groundwork of building them on socials and making sure that the DSP plan is solid, radio typically comes in on the back end in this day and age.
No, you've done a great job of laying that out. I'm hoping that the artists that are listening to this really understand a little bit more about how this industry works from a business perspective and why it's just not so easy to get a song placed and all the different moving pieces that are happening behind the scenes. Not to mention just whether or not your audience is latching onto your song, whether they want to listen to it, whether they like the song.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this industry, this is obviously one where relationships are everything, and it's very hard to break in. What advice would you give to a young person or someone new to the business to start building those relationships?
If I could just speak from my experience, don't be afraid to intern. Don't be afraid to work for free.
Yeah.
And if you're doing something that you love, for one, you're never going to, have a job as long as you're doing something that you love. And I've always loved what I've done because there was so much love for the business and for music initially coming into the business. It ended up landing me my jobs, and relationships that I built early on helped me get further jobs down the line. So don't be afraid to take on work that may seem like it's for free now.
Yeah.
Because it could, land a relationship that actually sets your career on its path for the remainder of your career. And that's just from my personal experience.
And that's great advice. Really just be willing to do whatever it takes.
Provide value,
Yes.
come in and provide value. A lot of times you may encounter an executive or someone that can help you in the business that actually needs help with some of the smaller things on their day-to-day grind. And if you can help fill the gap for some of those things, you just never know what that would mean to their day and how could it enhance how much work they get done based on you helping them out. Don't be afraid to give a little bit back in the beginning in order to get a lot on the back end.
Great advice. Well, I want to shift to right now. What are you doing now? Tell me more about Maven Marketing.
Yeah, man. So Maven Marketing is my own company. It's a promotion, marketing, and consulting company where I help indie artists and established artists with their strategy, with their promotion and marketing endeavors, giving them a wealth of knowledge of my 20 plus years in the business. It's been an interesting journey. In this last 2 years, I've taken on some great clients. I've worked with Ice Cube, which is interesting because I started my career working at Priority with Ice Cube back in the days.
Full circle, man.
So that was a full circle moment working with Ice Cube again. And a couple of really, really, really good indie acts that are on their way up. Being ground level and going back to the essence of how I started in the business has been a great reassertion of my career. And, I'm really enjoying just building out those strategies and helping break new artists.
So is it basically doing everything you've done, promotions and marketing, but more as an independent entity now, working with some of these larger and smaller independent artists, but you're still that cog of the wheel, essentially doing the same thing? Is that accurate to say?
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Just doing some of the same things I've done, just outside of a label system.
Okay, so where's Maven Marketing? Where are we taking this in the next 3 to 5 years? What's the goal?
I look forward to eventually transitioning back into a label system or doing something else that has to do music adjacent. Whether it's in the community services industry or otherwise. I like working in a system, and I'm strong in a system. So Maven will be here, but I'm definitely looking forward to finding my way back into a label system.
Sure. No, and I understand and respect that. It's definitely different, especially you've been working in a label system and within the industry for so long. And when you're on your own, it's cool because you have your own, you can build your own, you call the shots. But at the same time, you've been working with teams and other people that do other things, and there's this camaraderie and this connection, and it is harder when you're working by yourself, especially when you've been so used to doing that, and it becomes something that you really crave. And it's when you don't have that, there's something missing. And I've certainly felt like that several times through the years with my company. I'm like, I wish I had a team sometimes. I do miss that, and not everything falling on me. I mean, that's not the motivation, but it's always good to have other team members to bounce things off of, and knowing that other people can execute a vision and you not having to create and execute everything.
Yeah, For sure. That camaraderie piece is big. And I definitely miss part of that. That's a great part of it. That day-to-day grinding with a team and building as a team and having team wins and watching you build out a plan from the beginning and watch that plan come to fruition. It's always a beautiful thing. So, I miss some of that, but I've been able to achieve some of that with Maven as well.
That's great.
And I'm looking forward to building upon that.
So outside of your work and the music that you have to listen to, what songs or artists are you listening to these days?
Man, who am I a fan of? I'm a big fan of Larry June.
Okay.
Big fan of Freddie Gibbs. I like my rap a certain way.
Yeah.
I like my hip hop real authentic.
Yes.
I don't want to say underground, but I'm still a very much so into K-Dot. Looking for music from him every time he comes out. And I've been really getting into R&B again.
Okay. Like new R&B or artist going back to
some newer
Okay.
R&B. There's a kid out there that I'm really interested in named Destin Conrad.
Okay.
He's really dope. Really into him. And just finding my way down that new rabbit hole of progressive R&B. Yeah, that's kind of where music chops have been lying at recently.
You like the rap served a certain way, almost like it's a plate in front of you and how you like a steak cooked. There's a certain way that you like it.
Yes, sir. A nice medium steak with a little Pittsburgh char on it. Never hurt anybody.
Yeah, and some Larry June. Yeah.
And some Larry June, for sure.
Yeah. Well, we've reached the part we're going to do the clarity cards. So I'm going to ask you a question. And your question is, what does success look like to you? What does success look like to you?
Success to me in 2026 looks very different than what it looked like just even a few years ago. Success to me looks like happiness. Being happy with where you are, who you are, and what you are. Having peace of mind each and every day and being able to say, I'm good with that. I'm good with who I am and I feel great about the person that I am. And that's kind of where I'm at. You know,
I feel
for a long
so
time,
much.
I was chasing the goals of work only and primarily focused on my career. And now I have an opportunity to focus on both my career and myself. And that's been the lesson that I've been able to take since I've been outside of a label. Just spending more time on myself and focused on building happiness as a whole person as opposed to just part of my being. You know?
I completely understand that. What you said resonates with me a lot. Very similar place where it's like the happiness and the peace of mind. To me, that is everything. If you can achieve those two things, you are successful.
Yeah.
So Keinon, thank you for joining today. Thank you for sharing some knowledge, some experience, some stories. I wish you all the best with Maven Marketing and future endeavors. Your story is still in action, so I'll be curious to continue to follow your career and see where you go next after this. What is the best way for people to follow or connect with you online?
You can search me on any social media platform at Keinon Johnson, JOHNSON, Keinon Johnson, or search Keinon the Maven on both Instagram and X. On Facebook, I'm Keinon Johnson, but I don't really use Facebook like that. So Instagram, Keinon the Maven. You can find me pretty easily there, and I'll be the first Keinon that pops up under Keinon. Looking forward to connecting with you guys.
Cool. Thanks, Keinon. And to the listener, thank you for tuning in to the Jeremy Hazelwood Show. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow or subscribe so you're always up to date when the latest episode drops. And until next time, keep following your dreams to find your purpose.